Welcome back. The National Financial Ombudsman Banking Division has returned over 60 million rand to consumers this year. The payouts followed intense adjudications, investigations, rulings and ultimately settlements related mostly to banking fraud and in some instances bank service failures. The Ombud found that most common trend in cases lodged was fraud through digital banking platforms. Let's get more insights now with Adjudication Manager in the Banking Division of the National Financial Ombud Scheme, Johan Brouwer. Johan, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this morning. So it certainly is quite interesting in terms of the amount that now has been handed back to consumers, but perhaps talk to us with regards to what has led to so much of this banking fraud.
Hi, Katlego. Thank you for having us on. I think the trends in banking fraud relate mostly to the fact that banks have very secure systems. So what fraudsters are doing at the moment is they are targeting bank customers as a way to access the customers' accounts or to get customers to transfer funds to fraudulent accounts that then the fraudsters can withdraw and use.
So when you then view how the evolution of digital banking and emergent fintech innovations have really just challenged traditional dispute resolution mechanisms, what adaptive strategies are being considered to stay ahead of this increasingly complex fraud tactic?
So I think the main thing that as an industry and including the Office of the National Financial Ombud is educating consumers. We need to make consumers aware of the new trends and the risks associated with a digital banking fraud and the emerging trends relating to artificial intelligence and the way that fraudsters are making use of artificial intelligence more in trying to persuade customers that they are talking to a legitimate bank or a legitimate financial institution, and in that way tricking them into disclosing their confidential access information or making the transactions themselves. So I think as an industry, we are doing what we can, but more can be done to make consumers aware of these risks. And then I also think from consumer side, you need to understand that phone that you're holding in your hand is basically a bank branch. So any type of transaction nowadays can be done on your phone, and there are many risks associated with that. So it's important to understand that and then educate yourself about the risks and what the current trends are, what to look out for, when not to trust something and when to contact your bank if you feel like something suspicious is happening.
When you speak about that education, particularly that consumers need to have, you say holding a phone is like having a bank branch in your hand. How much more sophisticated are those that are taking money from consumers, especially when it comes to banking fraud digitally?
So current trends, one thing that we've seen is that fraudsters are now able to mask numbers to look like it is actually the bank that's calling you. So when you receive the call on your phone, it will be the bank's number that is calling you. So that's how sophisticated they are in respect of that. And then as I mentioned with AI, they are now able to clone voices. They're able to create videos, perhaps with my likeness, and send that to a customer to try and trick them into believing that, yes, Johan Brouwer made this video and he's telling you that there's this great investment opportunity that you need to take part in. So all across the spectrum, we're seeing fraudsters taking advantage of new technology and AI to try and trick bank customers into different types of fraud.
So beyond the immediate financial recoveries, how does then the NFO measure the long-term impact of its rulings on consumer trust and the internal culture of banks regarding customer service and ethical standards?
So in every case that we receive, we look at what happened. So for instance, if it's a fraud case, we look at the fraud. How did the fraud take place? Who is responsible? But we also then look at the conduct specifically of the bank in that case. Were their systems sufficiently secure, or were they easily manipulated by fraudsters to allow the fraud to happen? Did the bank notify their customers sufficiently of the risks, of the functionality of certain products or the banking app, or did they notify them correctly whilst that fraud was taking place? If we find any failings on the bank in those aspects, we make recommendations, and we have made recommendations which have then changed the way that banks operate, the way that they communicate with their customers, the functionality of certain products and features. And in that way, we make it safer for going forward for other customers.
So in those cases where banks repeatedly fail to comply with the NFO rulings, what enforcement mechanisms or sanctions are in place, and how effective are they in ensuring compliance and systemic change?
We can't. There hasn't been an instance where a bank has not complied with a ruling that we've made to date. But built into our operating rules is an appeal mechanism. So if a bank does not agree with our ruling, they are able to appeal that ruling, and it goes to an appeal tribunal that is comprised of 3 retired, very well-respected judges. And the judges then look at that case and make a final binding ruling, which the bank must adhere to. Similarly, if we, for instance, make a ruling that a customer is not satisfied with, and they feel that we were wrong in our finding, they can also follow that appeal mechanism, and the judges will look at the case, look at our finding, and if they find that we were wrong, they will overrule our finding and make a new ruling, which is also binding on the bank. And what typically happens is, if we follow that process, banks will effect change internally so that they don't find themselves at that point again to make a ruling. But as I said, in the banking division, we have not had an appeal from a bank as yet.
Right. So lastly, Johan, if you could implement one transformative change within the dispute resolution ecosystem in South Africa, what would it be?
I think particularly related to digital banking fraud. At the moment, South Africa is lagging a bit behind our peer countries in terms of rules related to when a bank should be responsible for refunding a customer. If we look at jurisdictions like the UK and Australia, there are specific legislation and rules put in place by the regulators, which then say that in these set of facts, the bank will be liable. So it makes it easier for an alternative dispute resolution office like ours to then look at the rules, interpret them, and say when the bank will be liable. So I think if the Financial Sector Conduct Authority in South Africa can formulate rules like that, it will be extremely helpful to our office.
All right, Johan, thank you so much for your time. Certainly good news for those fraud victims. Over 60 million rands that has been paid to consumers this year. Thank you so much for your time. That was Adjudication Manager in the Banking Division of the National Financial Ombud Scheme, Johan Brouwer.